Hello and welcome to Papa Scares Horror Stories. As much as I love everything horror, I've never been tempted to use a Ouija board. And here are 6 true creepy experiences with Ouija boards to help explain why. If you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone who might also enjoy it. I would really appreciate it and it would really help my channel grow. With that out of the way, let the nightmares begin. So about 2 years ago, my nana brought home a Ouija board that she found at a yard sale. I have always been a true believer in the paranormal, and it's always been one of my peak interests. I have heard or read enough stories and watched enough shows to know not to mess around with a Ouija board, and quite frankly, they kind of freaked me out, so I wanted nothing to do with it. My nana, on the other hand, doesn't believe in the paranormal whatsoever, and thought it would be just a fun game for myself, my brother, and the oldest of my 2 cousins. I left it on the dining room table for days before she made me put it away. I ended up sliding it under my bed in hopes of just forgetting about it. My brother, 11, and my cousin, 12, bugged me about it constantly because they wanted to play with it, and I wouldn't let them. I tried to explain to them that it wasn't just a game, and that it shouldn't be messed with, but they were preteen boys who couldn't help but to do things they shouldn't do. One day after I got home from work, the boys were there, and I had this sneaking suspicion they played with it. I looked under my bed, and it was there, but I had this odd feeling about it. That's when I went downstairs and interrogated them about it. At first, they denied it, but I saw right through them, and they finally admitted that they had played with it. I asked them if they had said goodbye when they were done, and they said they did. My cousin likes to over-exaggerate stories big time and make things up and be overly dramatic. So when he told me about the couple of things that supposedly happened, I didn't believe him at all. Also, they were boys who liked to mess with each other, so I assumed that's what was happening. Anyways, a couple of nights later I got in bed, and as I lay there trying to fall asleep, I got this feeling that I'm being watched. I looked over at my closet, which has 2 sliding doors, and I noticed one of the doors slightly opened, leaving a small space between the doors. It creeped me out for some reason, so I turned and faced the other way, trying to ignore everything and fall asleep. I finally fell asleep, and the next thing I know, I'm woken up by what felt like someone or something hitting me in the back of the head. I was laying on my back, so the back of my head was fully on my pillow, which made it even weirder. It wasn't a light hit either. It freaked me out so much, I was shaking. I look around my room, and I don't see anything. But then, all of a sudden, I hear my floor creaking like someone is walking around my bed. I'm so freaked out at this point it wasn't funny. After laying there for a good little while, I finally got the courage to get up and grab my phone and book it to my living room. I sat down and tried to calm down. I could still feel a tingling, pulsating sensation on the back of my head. I turned to my phone and realized it's 3 in the morning. I called my boyfriend, now husband, with tears streaming down my face from being so freaked out. He didn't pick me up, and I swear I called him another 15-20 times before I finally gave up. I sat on the chair until my nana got up around 6. I didn't tell her what happened because I knew she wouldn't believe me and would say I was acting stupid. After she got up, I had breakfast and then called my boyfriend again, and he finally picked up. He told me he had his phone on silent mode, so he didn't know I'd been calling. I told him what happened and he felt so bad, and felt like an idiot for having his phone on silent. He told me he would have come over in a heartbeat to comfort me and was so apologetic. Later that day, he came over and we took the Ouija board to a junkyard to get rid of it. My husband is the only one in my family that knows what happened, and I didn't experience anything again after I got rid of the Ouija board. Moral of the story: Ouija boards should not be messed with. When I was in college, I had a roommate who was really sweet and gentle. I loved her. She was a great person, but extremely simple, if you know what I mean. One night on the weekend, we decided to make a Ouija board because we were bored. It started out pretty much not doing anything, but after a few minutes though, it started moving. Except only when my roommate was touching it. It wouldn't move at all for me. I know it wasn't her doing it because I started asking questions about myself she wouldn't have ever known, and it was answering everything correctly. It spelled out my mother's name, who I didn't even talk to and had never told her or anyone there about. It knew what city I was from, even though I just told everyone I was from Boston because it's easier. It knew my father's name, who died when I was only 9 months old. It knew everything. After a few questions though, it started to spell out strange shit like people and places that weren't really local or relevant to either of us. According to the board, it was supposedly a kid, and they said they died in a river and all this stuff. But it started turning dark, so I just cut that shit off and was like, we're done. I said my goodbyes and decided to put it in the trash, but my roommate was still acting weird. She had this like dark demeanor about her, which is literally nothing like her. I was like, what the fuck is going on with you? She just said it was nothing and laid down on top of her covers and everything, so I shrugged it off and went to the lobby of the dorm to watch TV. Later that night, when I went to bed, she was still laying in that same position, but I just decided to ignore her and go to bed. That night I couldn't sleep for shit, and kept seeing a black figure pop up out of the bathroom doorway that was placed directly in front of my bed. So eventually I said fuck that and got a Bible from the RA. That apparently didn't help my case, because little shit started moving around on my desk to the point where I went and slept on the couch in the lobby. My RA really didn't want to let me in, but I told her I'm not going back in there until either God himself shows up or sunrise, because we fucked up and something isn't right. Eventually, I did end up back in my room, and I did fall asleep out of pure exhaustion. But that girl literally never went back to being that sweet little mouse she always was, and even to this day, she's just so different. I feel bad because nothing happened to me in the way it affected her, but I didn't intend on anything to happen like that. I felt literally nothing when we touched the board, except a weird, like, rocking back and forth in my body that wasn't visible to my roommate. When I touched the cup we used, I felt nothing, and it didn't even move or anything, only for her. Very weird and will never happen again, as far as I'm concerned. When I first met my now husband, I was young, naive, and too curious of a person for my own good. At the time I was newly pregnant, and we were living in an apartment with my sister. One day, we were in a conversation about the paranormal. As a child, I had many things happen that I couldn't explain or that were terrifying, and we were telling stories. My husband was being super skeptical about every story told, so me and my sister, being ignorant, suggested we go buy a Ouija board and show him that spirits were real. I had heard horror stories about the board, even from my own father. But I was that person that had to find out for myself. Oh, how naive and stupid I was, I now realize. We buy a board, and at first we took it to a park to try it out, trying to separate it from home. Nothing was happening and we were getting frustrated. So we left for home. After we got home, my sister kept going on about trying it again. Eventually, we agreed and took it to my bedroom to play despite my hesitation. After a few minutes of no response, the planchette eventually moved to a yes after asking if any spirits were there. We were pretty excited that it was moving, and even tried to debunk if the other could have moved it to be funny. Right away, the planchette wouldn't answer questions, but kept moving in a figure 8 motion over and over. We eventually got tired of its lack of response and gave up. A few days later, my sister came to me upset and said that the night before, her door was shaking violently. It was closed and it was like someone was pushing the door back and forth. She seemed pretty freaked out. I just listened, but in my mind, I wasn't perceiving it as that big of a deal. A few nights later, my husband and I were laying in bed trying to sleep. All of a sudden, our bedroom door started to shake back and forth, just like my sister described. But it was definitely not as minor as I thought. The door was shaking rapidly and violently. I woke my husband and said, "Look at the door." He just stared at it and said, "What the hell?" We watched it shake for a few minutes, and then it eventually stopped. When it did stop, my husband got up and looked out in the hall and checked on my sister. No one was there and she was fast asleep. We just kinda shook it off. For months, the door shaking happened to one of us almost every night. We started staying at my parents' house more often just to avoid the freaky nights. One night, I was about 7 months pregnant this time. I had taken my husband's kids to school that morning. He has 2 kids from a previous marriage, and I was extremely tired that morning. So when I returned home, I decided to go back to bed for a little while. I was sleeping when I was all of a sudden awoken with the feeling of something crawling or walking along my feet on the bed. I sat up and looked. Nothing was there. I thought I just dreamed it and fell back to sleep. Then I was awoken again thinking something was crawling or walking towards me on the bed. I sat up again. Nothing was there. I told myself it was a dream again and laid back down. I was trying to fall back asleep when I felt it again. This time I wasn't asleep. It felt like when a cat is walking towards you on a bed. Very light but distinct like paws. We don't have a cat or any animal due to my severe allergies to them. I shut up in bed and looked but saw nothing there. That time, I was really freaked out and realized I wasn't dreaming the first 2 times I felt it either. I got out of that apartment so fast and refused to go back in until my husband got home. It really shook me up. We moved out of that apartment about a month later. I do believe that something attached to us, as we have had a lot of freaky experiences still using that board. But that's for another long story. I would be happy to share if interested. I still wonder if tenants still have the doors shake at night in that apartment, or if it left with me. I won't ever play with a Ouija board again. I never believed Ouija is a real deal. I still don't actually believe in it, but this experience left me with a lot of questions. A few years ago, me and some friends met up at a local pub, and we reserved a private room to play Ouija without the staff of the pub knowing. We used a paper as a table and a coin. Me and another girl thought it's complete bullshit and laughed every time the coin didn't move. One of my friends, I'll call her B, started asking questions, and suddenly the coin moved. She asked questions only her ex who died knew the answers to. Apparently, the coin spelled out the true responses. After that, she stopped playing, but the rest of us continued. We made up silly questions and got weird responses. In the end, we burned the paper. The next week that followed was one of the most terrible weeks of our lives. First, B woke up with long scars on her neck, like someone or something scratched her neck. She also could hear whispers and knocking in the middle of the night. The next morning, another girl woke up with a bite on her leg. After that, I woke up and found blood on my pillow. I still don't know the source of the blood. My ears and nose didn't bleed, and at night, when I got home, a few rocks were violently thrown at my gate. But nobody was on the street. B went to every church in town, Baptist and Orthodox. I am from Romania. And nothing changed. We decided to visit the priest that is next to my house. He tried to bless us, but he was so scared and looked at the church door with extreme fear. Still, our problems persisted. Until I went to sleep. I can't tell if it was a dream or not because it felt real. I saw a figure in a hood with a jackal-like face. It whispered something while I was asleep. The next day, everything came back to normal. I still can't find an explanation for that week, but it gave me chills when I think about it. My freshman year of high school, my friends and I were really into playing with Ouija boards. I was always skeptical of whether or not they actually worked until this experience. My friends and I had gotten word that a few people at our school had started a paranormal club. We were all pretty excited to hear about this since we were all into that type of stuff. A group of about 9 of us decided to go to the first meeting held after school one day. When we showed up to the room where the meeting was held, we were surprised to find it was just us and a few others, as well as the 2 girls that had started the club and the teacher chaperoning the meeting. One of the girls who started the club announced that for our first meeting, we were going to be watching an episode of Ghost Adventures since it had some good paranormal encounters. My friends and I were pretty bummed that we were just watching a TV show. We expected to be doing something totally different. About 10 minutes into the episode, me and 4 of my other friends got bored, and since we were only 14-15 at the time and couldn't leave until our parents picked us up, we decided to go hang out in one of our favorite teachers' rooms. We told the teacher we were at the paranormal club across the hall and how we joined because we were into playing Ouija boards. So my friend had the bright idea that we should play one in his room since she knew how to make them. Our teacher was reluctant at first, but eventually let us do it. My friend grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and scribbled down yes, no, and the letters and numbers. We got a makeshift planchette. I think we used like a quarter or something. We sat down at a table and started the game. We asked it, "Are you there?" And it slowly slid to yes. Then we asked, "What is your name?" It first slid to D, then O, then N. We quickly slid to goodbye, since this wasn't our first time coming into contact with a spirit named Don. So a little backstory, this Don spirit had come through on multiple occasions when my friend Megan would play the Ouija board. He would say he was one of her family members who had passed, but upon asking her parents if they had a deceased relative named Don, they assured her that they did not. So whenever Don came on the Ouija board, we knew just to slide to goodbye and not talk to him, since we thought he was bad news. Right as we told Don goodbye, the paranormal club leaders had burst into the classroom saying that they had been looking for us, and asked why we were ditching their meeting. One of them walked closer to where we were sitting and saw the Ouija board. She started scolding us and telling us not to mess with Ouija boards because there are bad spirits. We assured her that we knew what we were doing since we had done it so many times before. The girl sighed and let us get on with our game. She turned around to leave the room, but before she walked out, she told us about a girl who went to our high school back in the 90s or something, and said she died nearby. She asked us if we were going to play with the Ouija board if we could find out this girl's name. We agreed, and both girls left the room. I'd like to emphasize the fact that none of us knew this girl's name, let alone that there was a girl who died near the school. We thought it would be pretty cool if we could find out her name through the board, but didn't expect much. We then asked the Ouija board again, "Is anyone there?" It stalled for a minute, then slowly creeped to yes. I asked something along the lines of, "There was a student who died here. What was her name?" There was a long pause. Then the game piece started to move. It first slid to S, then A, then R, then A, then H. Sarah? We all froze for a moment. My friend Megan broke the silence eventually by asking the board, "What's your name?" It spelled out D-O-N. We all slid the planchette to goodbye as fast as we could. We then started joking about Megan's so-called relative, Don, and how he was always trying to mess with us. A few minutes passed and the leader from the paranormal club came in our classroom again from across the hall. She said, "Hey guys, we did some research on the internet and we figured out the girl's name. It was Sarah." All our jaws dropped. I immediately started getting goosebumps. I'd like to remind you that none of us had any prior knowledge of this girl who passed away since it happened about 20 years prior. We told her that Sarah was the name we got when we asked the Ouija board. She got excited and told me and my friends to follow her across the hall. We looked at the computer she had been doing her research on, and sure enough, Sarah's obituary was pulled up on the screen. She was struck by a car while attempting to cross the main road near our school. The girl also said, and this chilled me to my core, that she found another obituary for a janitor who worked at my high school in the 90s and committed suicide. His name? Don. This happened when I was about 15, at my aunt's house in Southern California. Every summer as a kid, I spent at least a month at my aunt's house with my cousins. My aunt was a foster parent, and a very good one, so her agency always gave her the most disturbed and troubled kids. At the time, she had a Native American kid that was heavily medicated and disturbed. My cousin, Jessie, is about 2 years younger than me, and we were always getting ourselves into trouble. Earlier that day, my cousin Jesse suggested we play the Ouija board. I told him to fuck off. It's later in the evening and Jesse and I decide to wait for everyone to fall asleep and raid the alcohol cabinet. We stole one water bottle filled with a little bit of everything and passed it back and forth non-stop until we finished it. We were fucked up. He brings up the Ouija board again, and me being as drunk as I am, agree to it. We attempt to make a board out of lined paper and a marker. Pretty sure we didn't even make the board correctly. Neither one of us have ever played the game before. We started asking it the normal questions. Is anyone here with us? What is your name? You know, shit like that. Nothing's happening. We both start laughing and think it's a joke now. I start cussing out the ghost, calling it a pussy and saying, "He ain't gonna do shit." And we go about our night until we both pass out in his room. I wake up in the middle of the night, having to piss super bad. I stumble from the top of the bunk bed and make my way down the hallway to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom and see all the drawers and cabinets open. but nothing registers, and I take my piss and go back to the room without even paying it any mind. Jessie and I wake up that morning, super dehydrated and feeling like shit. We stumble to the bathroom to make coffee. My aunt is always awake super early, so of course she's ready in the kitchen, cooking and cleaning and what now. She sees us and looks super surprised and says, "Did you see the house this morning?" And we just look back at her super confused. She says, "I kid you not, every single window, cabinet, drawer and door in this whole entire house was opened when I woke up this morning." Jessie and I realized what we had done and look at each other like, no fucking way. My aunt then proceeds to blame it on the foster kid because he was known for sleepwalking, but usually when he would sleepwalk he would just kind of stand there at the door of his bedroom, and she said he had never done anything like that before and kind of laughed it off. We never really told her what really happened that night. Thank you very much for watching. That was 6 creepy true experiences with a Ouija board. I hope you enjoyed them. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone who also might like it. It would really help my channel grow. If you have any stories that you'd like to share on this channel, please send them to scarepapa@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and stay safe.